Oh, a pizza delivery guy sets off for his usual evening rounds. The air is crisp and the familiar scent of pepperoni and garlic fills the car as he drives through the quiet suburban streets. His route is predictable, his mind wandering as he mentally checks off the next delivery. He arrives at the house of Mrs. Ellison, an elderly woman who orders regularly. The house is dark with only a dim light from inside casting a faint glow onto the front steps. As Noah rings the doorbell, he hears a faint rustling from behind the door. His knock is met with silence for a few moments before the door slowly opens, revealing Mrs. Ellison. Her appearance is odd. Her skin is unnaturally pale, her eyes lack their usual warmth, and her movements are stiff, almost mechanical. Despite her strange demeanor, she greets Noah with a soft, absent smile and takes the pizza without saying much. There's an eerie quality to her stillness, but Noah doesn't think much of it. He hands her the pizza, ready to leave, but she seems to hesitate. She glances over her shoulder as though listening for something before quickly shutting the door. Later that evening, Noah's driving by Mrs. Ellison's house again. He notices something strange. The lights in her house are flickering, casting long, distorted shadows. He feels a growing sense of discomfort as he slows down. The front door is ajar, just wide enough for him to glimpse a shadow moving inside. Curiosity overpowers his hesitation. He decides to stop, thinking something might be wrong. Noah knocks again, and this time Mrs. Ellison opens the door more quickly, though her eyes dart nervously as she looks around. Her once warm expression has been replaced by a cold, vacant stare. The woman seems distant, her voice barely above a whisper as she invites him in. Something is off, but Noah can't put his finger on it. The house is quieter than usual, darker, and the air feels strangely cold. The familiar scent of garlic and pepperoni is gone, replaced by a musty, almost metallic odor. She takes the pizza but doesn't seem to recognize Noah's friendly banter. Instead, she lingers near the door, eyes shifting back and forth as though expecting someone. With a quick, almost robotic movement, she closes the door without another word, leaving Noah standing outside, unsettled but unsure why. The following night, Noah is back on his usual delivery route. As he approaches Mrs. Ellison's house again, his mind drifts back to the strange encounter. The house looks different night. Darker, quieter. He hesitates for a moment, but the thought of completing his route keeps him moving. He walks up to the door and knocks, but there's no response. He waits for a few moments, but the door slowly creaks open on its own. This time, the air inside feels colder, almost as if the house is holding its breath. Mrs. Ellison is nowhere in sight, but Noah can hear soft rustling from deeper inside. It sounds almost like someone is pacing, but the house is still empty. He calls out her name, but gets no response. He steps inside, just a little further, peering around the dark hallway. There's a strange feeling in the pit of his stomach, like he's intruding on something he shouldn't be. Suddenly, a low growl echoes from the darkness. Noah freezes. From the corner of his eye, he sees a figure moving. No, it's not a figure. It's a dog, a stray, creeping from the shadows. Its fur is matted and its eyes shine in the dim light. It barks sharply and Noah steps back, startled. As he turns to leave, he notices a man standing in the shadows of the hallway, but before he can react, the dog lunges and the figure retreats into the darkness. The following evening, Noah can't shake the unsettling feeling about Mrs. Ellison's house. Despite the strange happenings, he finds himself driving back, unable to let the mystery go. He arrives to find the front door wide open again, the house eerily silent. He hesitates for a moment before stepping inside, calling out for Mrs. Ellison. The house feels colder than before, the air thick with an unfamiliar tension. He walks further in, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. The living room is dark, with only the faint glow of the streetlights outside filtering through the curtains. As Noah reaches the hallway, he hears something, a faint rustling from behind the door to the kitchen. He moves toward it cautiously, his heart racing. Suddenly, the door slams open and Mrs. Ellison stumbles out, her once placid demeanor completely gone. Her eyes are wide with fear, her face pale and twisted. They're coming, she whispers, grabbing Noah's arm with a cold, trembling hand. Before he can respond, the sound of footsteps fills the house. A shadowy figure emerges from the darkened kitchen, moving fast. Noah instinctively steps back, but before the figure can reach him, the stray dog from the previous night lunges out of nowhere, barking fiercely and protecting him. The attacker recoils, disappearing into the shadows as the dog stands guard, growling low. The next morning, Noah can't stop thinking about what happened at Mrs. Ellison's house. He can still feel the coldness of the house, the unnerving chill of her touch, and the low growl of the dog. There's something about that dog. Its eyes, the way it stood between him and the attacker, something that feels familiar, but you can't place it. Driven by an uneasy curiosity, Noah decides to return to the house this time. He's determined to find out more. He parks down the street and waits, watching for any signs of movement. After a while, the dog appears at the door, looking directly at him with its piercing gaze, as if sensing Noah's approach. The dog turns and walks toward the backyard. Noah follows cautiously, heart pounding. In the corner of the yard, behind a large shed, the dog stops and sits, its eyes locked onto something buried beneath the ground. Noah kneels down and begins to dig, his hands shaking as he uncovers a small rusted box. When he opens it, he's stunned by what he finds. A series of photographs, old and faded, some of them showing Mrs. Ellison and the dog together in what seems to be an old, abandoned building. But as Noah flips through the pictures, he feels something else. An eerie sense of recognition. One of the photos shows the dog standing beside a familiar face. It's someone Noah knows, someone he didn't expect to see in a place like this. Noah's heart races as he stares at the photograph in his hands. The person in the photo with the dog is someone he recognizes instantly. An old acquaintance from his childhood, someone he thought had disappeared years ago. The man's face, however, is not one he associates with anything good. He remembers the stories whispered about this figure, stories that made Noah's skin crawl when he was younger. The more he thinks about it, the more certain he becomes. The dog is not just a stray, it's tied to something dark, something from the past. But what is Mrs. Ellison's role in all of this? Why is she involved with this man? And why does she seem to be hiding something so dangerous? Noah decides to confront Mrs. Ellison. He heads back to her house, determined to get the truth. But when he arrives, the door is wide open once again. The house is eerily still, no lights, no sounds. He steps inside, calling her name. There's no answer, but he can hear soft footsteps in the distance. As Noah moves deeper into the house, the dog appears again, its eyes fixed on him, but this time it's different. The dog's stance is not protective. It's almost expectant. Noah walks deeper into the house, every step heavier than the last. The dog follows silently, still watching him with those unsettling, knowing eyes. He reaches the living room, where he finds Mrs. Ellison standing by the fireplace, staring at the old photographs that Noah had uncovered earlier. She doesn't acknowledge him at first, but the tension in the room is palpable. Finally, she turns to face him. Her eyes are full of regret, and there's a deep sadness in her voice when she speaks. "If you shouldn't have come here," she says, her words barely above a whisper, but Noah presses on, unable to ignore the truth that's slowly coming to light. He demands answers about the man in the photo and the dog's true identity. Mrs. Ellison sighs and with a resigned look begins to explain. She tells Noah about a long-forgotten pact, one that ties her to the mysterious figure from the photograph, a man who was once a part of the town's dark history. The dog, she reveals, isn't just a pet. It's the guardian of a powerful secret, one that has kept the town safe for generations, but something went wrong, and now that secret is at risk. The man in the photo is linked to a series of disappearances that plagued the town years ago, and Noah's family is more connected to this mystery than he ever realized. As Noah listens to Mrs. Ellison's story, his mind races, piecing together the terrifying truth. The mysterious man in the photograph was once a key figure in the town, someone whose dark ambitions had been buried under layers of lies. The dog, loyal and fierce, was once his companion, guarding a secret so powerful that its existence was kept hidden from everyone, even from Noah's own family. The pact, she reveals, was made long ago between Noah's ancestors and this man to protect the town from an unspeakable threat that lurked in the shadows. But the balance has shifted. The man, whose power has been growing, is now free, and his return spells danger for everyone. Mrs. Ellison warns Noah that they are all in grave danger. Before she can say more, the dog barks sharply and the door slams open. Standing in the doorway is the man from the photograph, his face cold and twisted with malice. "You shouldn't have come here," he says to Noah, his voice low and menacing. Noah feels a surge of fear but refuses to back down. He steps forward, demanding the truth. Everything. The man laughs darkly, revealing the full extent of his intentions. He has waited years for this moment, and now Noah's bloodline is the key to unleashing the chaos he's been waiting for. Noah stands frozen, the weight of the man's words pressing heavily on him. The man steps further into the room, his presence dark and oppressive. The dog growls, but it doesn't move. The man smirks, his eyes locking with Noah's. "Do you think you're here by accident? You're the last piece of the puzzle." He sneers. Noah's heart races as the man's words start to sink in. His family's bloodline holds the key to ending the terror that has haunted the town for generations. He never asked for this, but now everything he's known about his family and himself is crumbling before him. With a deep breath, Noah clenches his fists. He won't let the man win. The dog, sensing Noah's resolve, steps forward protectively. A battle begins to unfold, not just between Noah and the man, but between the light of truth and the shadows of evil that have loomed over the town for too long. Noah grabs a nearby piece of metal, using it as a weapon to fend off the man. They struggle fiercely, but with every blow, Noah begins to realize that this fight isn't just physical. The town's fate and the fate of those he loves depend on his will to face this terror head-on. As the fight reaches its peak, the dog leaps forward, tackling the man and giving Noah the opportunity to finish what he started with. A final powerful blow. The man is defeated, but not without leaving behind a lingering sense of dread. Noah knows the victory is bittersweet. The secrets may have been uncovered, but the town's darkness is far from gone.